We live in a fast-paced and hectic world where it's easy to feel overwhelmed, stressed, and out of control. How do you manage all the competing pressures without losing sense of yourself? How do you stay focused enough to not only plot a path, but follow it? Welcome to Recovery Road, a show that offers inspiration, insight, and intelligence, as well as success stories from many walks of life that can show you how you can control your own destiny. Our knowledgeable and entertaining hosts and their guests give practical advice that you can use every day on your road to recovery. Now, here are your hosts, Leaha Mattinson and Greg Bird.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's show. I'm host Leaha Mattinson, and I'm just wanting to thank everyone from around the world for tuning into our episodes on Recovery Road. I'm joined as usual by my wonderful co-host and hometown hero, Greg Bird. Greg, how are you today?
Thanks, Leah. I'm doing amazing, actually. Back at the PPI office today. Again, heading up this little skeleton crew that we got going here. And I got to say, I got to throw out to Jana. I know she's watching, listening today. It says, "You can do it," says caffeine on this big, giant coffee mug. So, Jana, I'm using your cup. We're thinking about you. We love you. Anyway, it's nice to be back at the office, Leah.
Congratulations for your return, Greg. Now we have a wonderful special guest with us today for our part four of our four-part series, part three, actually, sorry, of our four-part series. So Greg, without further ado, maybe you could start the show off with your wonderful meme of the day and an introduction of our secret special, very handsome, only ranks a 7, did you say? 8, 9, 10?
Out of 10, it was a soft 6, 7 at best.
Soft 6. So wait for it, everybody.
All right. Well, again, welcome back, Ben Fortier, to the show. It's great to have you. We'll call you Cousin Ben on this episode, this show, but nice to have you back and sharing some of your expertise when it comes to planning with advisors, clients, and business owners. So, Ben, welcome to the show.
Yeah, glad to be here.
All right. Meme of the day, you guys. Man, we got some good ones today. They were all upbeat. It's a Friday, so while we're recording this, and again, we've got one from a Michelle White Wolf. So this was with all the back to school photos that seem really relevant. She posts, most people are at the age where they're using their phones to document the good times in their lives. She's like, I'm at the age where I use my phone to take pictures of labels that I can't read and then use my phone to enlarge the print so I can read it. So that was pretty good. Thanks, Michelle. We got another one. From a Nikki Zubot out in the world, says, sometimes someone unexpected comes into your life out of nowhere, makes your heart race, and changes you forever. We call those people cops. So again, shout out to all the law enforcement out there. I thank God I haven't been pulled over since October 2018, knock on wood. I got one more to share, Leah, and then we'll continue on with the show. We got our good friend, Teresa Wright, formerly Teresa Llewellyn. She's raising money for her Jump for the Cure for kids' cancer. So she had some great posts. She's trying to raise a modest $2,000. Let's add a 0 to that. So we got some generous donations out there, or donors listening. She's out there raising that money for kids' cancer. So hats off to Teresa Wright.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Thanks. And thanks, Greg, for those wonderful memes.
You're welcome.
Yes, thanks for sharing. So here we are talking about the third and the fourth part of the reason why people need to have agreements in place with their business partners and loved ones. It is actually riveting, and I'll tell you why you should be listening is because if you've been through a divorce and you have a business, it can change your life for a decade. One divorce, and it can change the outcome of your children's lives for their entire lifespan. And so if you're sitting there right now with your partner and you're all in love and going, wow, we have this great business together, that is awesome. And we congratulate you for that. But we're going to talk a little bit about the statistics of how many people get divorced and then just the long-term effects on the bank account and the health that people experience, and then how you can actually circumvent that right now today by the wisdom that both Ben and Greg are going to be sharing. And the reason why you would do that is because it's the most loving thing to actually do for each other, which is we're a fan of that. What's the most loving thing that we can do? So Greg, do you want to tee it up a little bit more?
Sure. Well, I don't want to be this one to say it, but I believe collectively we've all been through that big D, and we don't mean Dallas. But as it comes to a buy-sell agreement, having those times, and Ben, you said it best on one of the previous episodes, you know, it's best to have those conversations when things are going good. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you ascribe to the relational change concept being that when you're doing good, you're doing good, you're doing good, you're kind of putting change into a relational bank account. And then when you have an ask of somebody or when something goes awry, you're taking change from that bank account. And when that bank account hits zero, that's when things start to go really bad in a relationship. And so having these types of discussions, the what happens if something goes really bad situation, those are never really going to be opportunities to add a bunch of change to a bank account because you're talking about a negative thing. So the times to do that is when you feel like in your relationship there's a lot of change, there's a lot of room in that relationship. That's when you have to have those discussions, because if you're having those discussions when there's no change left in the relational account, that's going to go very poorly, and you end up getting a lot of bitterness and a lot of grief.
Mm-hmm. So what started out as utopia, two lovers building an extremely awesome legacy,
Yeah.
can quickly turn on its head and become something that's not so hot. What's the rate of divorce rate now? Do you guys happen to know offhand, first time marriages that end in divorce in North America?
Don't know the actual stat. The only thing that I've seen personally is it's been increasing. I could honestly say over this last 2 years, throw the COVID pandemic in the mix, just people were at a breaking point. If they were at a breaking point before, and then that put the test, that COVID was the catalyst to really maybe end things. And not just in a marriage, but in a business as well. Ben, you know what? How many business owners have you seen go through the strife that we've seen over the last 2 years in business?
Well, quite a few. And it's not just because of death or disability and things that are out of our hands, but, you know, I would imagine that, well, COVID obviously kept couples together for longer periods of time than they were really in before. You know, in my marriage with Jen, I discovered that one of her secret superpowers was she was omnipresent everywhere all the time. And we used that time to kind of strengthen our relationship. And I think that was great for us to do, but not every couple had that opportunity. And things didn't work out all that great for them. The other thing I think that's adding to maybe rates of divorce nowadays is just social media, online dating apps. It's very easy nowadays to say, what else is out there? The grass is always greener on the other side, and the mind plays tricks on us. And I think that's the same thing when it comes to employment. When you're employed with somebody else and when you're business partners with somebody else, you've decided to be in this thing. COVID created some negative effects for a lot of businesses, and a lot of partners, even if they were partners of a business, are Googling, what kind of job can I do from home? What else is out there? What am I passionate about with my life? And am I passionate about this current job? Things like that. And they might be looking to, you know, make a move from a business standpoint as well. Internet, online has been amazing, but it's also opened up for us a lot of options, a lot of ways to look into things, which is great to some degree, but it can also be a bit of a double-edged sword to make you to some degree dissatisfied with your current level of existence.
I love that. I love the way that you frame it, because it is when we have more choice, we don't do well. That's a very, very long-standing understanding in psychology, in the world of psychology, is human beings do good with 2 or 3 choices, and immediate gratification is about what 70% plus of people went for prior to the internet actually being so on us all the time with stimulation. So before the internet, 70% of the time people would pick the thing that was going to be the most easy to get to. So if I was going to give you $5 today or $100 in a week from now, 70% of people would take the $5 today.
Sure.
that ability to wait for anything is almost non-existent, and it's only become more emphasized as a result of everyone being on the internet, to your point, Ben, and the stimulation there. So not being able to have the blinders on has been a big challenge for a lot of people. So here we are, the way that things are presently. There's two things I'd like to talk a little bit about, I guess, which is from your perspective, guys, what do you think are ways that we can protect ourselves from that? And, if there's cracks in that foundation, how do we, shore up those cracks? What do you think about that?
Great point, Leah, to bring up. And I just, you know what, we always have the attitude, if we can help at least one person by doing these shows, if there's someone listening right now that is kind of contemplating, hey, we're at a good point right now, have that conversation. And I'm going to speak just from a business owner standpoint right now. If you've got business partners and it's good right now and you're listening, go have that conversation. We should just put something in place. And then a buy-sell agreement is a roadmap. We talked about what happens in a death. That's almost the easiest one, believe it or not, because it's just cut and dry and you guys can have a plan and have life insurance to fund it. Disability, a little bit tougher. But what happens in a divorce situation or a disagreement? You got to make sure you got that plan in place without duking it out, so to speak. And maybe we can share some examples of what we've seen good and bad. Ben, what's something that's coming to mind for you, either good or bad, where you've helped, say, a business owner go through this time, or even a husband and wife go through this time of getting stuff in place now while times are good? Ben?
Well, we've obviously had a lot of clients that have gone through divorces. The thing about shareholders agreements, they're called triggering events. And a triggering event says, this is the point in time when this business is going to get bought and sold. Obviously, one of those times is death. If a partner dies, that's a triggering event. If there's a disability that's going to be permanent, long-standing, that's a triggering event. Oftentimes things like incarceration, that's a triggering event. Do you want a partner that's in prison? Maybe not. Bankruptcy is oftentimes a triggering event, so that the shares of the business don't go into the hands of the bankruptcy trustee. And divorce is not necessarily a triggering event. So let's say, you're in business with somebody, they end up going through a divorce. That shouldn't force the other partner or the business to have to buy that person out. The times when divorce becomes a triggering event is, when you have divorces, and if you've ever been through a divorce, you kind of know or could know what this is like. But people get lost in the minutia of the agreement. There's a lot of fear. Money is emotional. Add to that relational strife. It affects literally every area of your life. You're in this relationship with this person, it's the most intimate relationship that you have in your life, and then that thing's breaking down. They're affecting your bank account, your relationships. You're breaking up with friends that you've had. Which friend is going to support which person? And there's all of these things that are happening. Some flow naturally, and then some need to be discussed. And obviously, when it comes to money, everything gets discussed. You have people who are saying, oh, for the kids, I bought this bottle of Advil, that needs to be, put in, this category, you got to share that cost. Just like you can get really, really deep into the weeds. And then one of those things that you're just really deep in the weeds on is, if you own a company, how much is this company worth? Mm-hmm. How should we buy you out of this company? Because half of those shares owned by that person are now owned by the spouse. And so what a shareholders agreement typically outlines, it says, okay, if you work this out with your spouse and you can kind of horse trade within your own family to say, you're going to get all of these things, but I'm going to get the shares of the company, then there's no triggering event here. But what happens if you can't figure this out at all? This goes in front of a judge, and somehow the judge goes, nope, this spouse who is in no way involved in the company, they're getting this many shares. At that point, that's a triggering event. Typically in a shareholders agreement, that will trigger that, because now you've got a partner who's sitting around the partnership table who you never intended on actually being there. So oftentimes for tips that I talk to my clients about, and oftentimes we're having this discussion, is what's your relationship like with your partner's family? Because regardless, they're kind of a partner in the business already. That person's going home, they're sitting around the kitchen table for dinner, they're having discussions with their spouse, and that input is coming in one ear. And if you're married, you know exactly what I mean. You can't separate that out from your regular life. You're going to have to play out something there because you're going to be hearing it quite a bit. So you have to do things to improve your relationships with your partner's families. That is a massive piece of importance. And if there is cantankerous relationships there, but you're getting along with the partner, maybe not with their spouse, you need to make sure that that is pretty airtight as far as divorce is concerned in your agreement.
That's great wisdom there, Ben, because there's some people listening right now is like, I don't even know my partner's wife or husband right now, so maybe I better get on that. So Leaha, from your perspective, how important would that be?
Well, and business to me is long-term planning. So we talk about 7 generations planning, and I'm a farm girl. So I've seen lots of farm families get completely decimated with divorce in the 2nd or 3rd generation. And so the relationship with these people that you're sitting around with the table is very real because you're going to work with them every single day. So you know them, but that isn't the case. Then I worked in executive coaching, for lots of big companies, and a lot of people didn't know each other's spouses, but the companies that were really successful and uber rich were the people who shared time together with the executive team and the spouses. So they all spent intentional time together, not at business meetings, but actually going for dinner together, going to retreats together for the weekend, and learning how to appreciate each other outside that work environment. And so I think that's really important, Ben. And thinking about the business as this, are you only thinking about the next 5 years, which is if you're in that startup phase, yeah, you're thinking about the next 12 months or 3 months. It's like, how are you getting your cash flow going? But if you're, a little bit longer into the game and you haven't thought about, well, what's this company going to be like in 5 years or 10 years? It's a good practice to start doing that, to start dreaming about that, envisioning it, and actually saying, who's in this picture? I often do exercises with clients to talk about, just close your eyes and actually picture who's in your life 10 years from now. What year is it? How old are your kids? What are you guys doing? Who shows up in your picture that brings joy to your life that you automatically can see them there, still there? What role are they in? How does that, play? And so how does that elevate you? How do you feel about all that? So that they get into the vibration of understanding, wow, like my kids will be, if they're 3 now, they're going to be 13. Ooh, if so-and-so is my partner or my wife, in 10 years from now, they're going to be 40. If you start your business when you're young, or they're going to be 50, what are they going to need? So it starts to actually change the context that you treat people and that you treat your business. So I love this, like the idea of really getting to understand your business partners. And people change. People go, oh, people don't change that much, but people change when there is money at stake. And so you can think that you know somebody really well, and even they will say, I would never do that. I would never take money that isn't mine. I would never do, whatever it is. And then when people get into quote unquote desperate spots or survival thinking or whatever, they all of a sudden turn their values, just completely turn on their head. And then you're dealing with a reptilian brain person that maybe you've actually seen be okay for the last 5 years or 5 years. And then all of a sudden they're this other person. So so thanks, Ben. It's like know who you're working with every day, know who's going to be at that table with you, spend time with them so you can really see them, how they are in their environment too, because they can act one way with you and then be completely something else out in the, the rest of their life. So it does pays to know what people are like. And to talk with them about character and values and morals and moral development and, how are you developing as a human being? And do you think you're on track or off track? So
I completely agree with that. I mean, money, I continually say money is emotional, but part of that is that money has been proven to be linked to that part of the brain that also you deal with survival. So you just mentioned that when money's on the table, people's attitude changes, and that's 100% true. Because no matter how rational you think somebody is, I think I saw a stat that you're about 6 missed meals away from anarchy.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're getting 3 meals a day, you're fine. You're the Leaha, you know. But then you kind of think, but if you were forced to miss 6 meals a day that was not your choice, how soon would you start to make decisions that you didn't think you were possible to make? And money's the same way. Once money gets on the table, then people enter a bit of a survival mode that changes the way you think they might typically act. Couple of things to watch out for as well is if you're in business and somebody's getting married, one of your partners is getting married, you might want to float the idea of a prenup. Have a good discussion with a great family lawyer and say, hey, is there a way that we can protect ourselves from this with a prenup? Can we have a prenup that just deals with the shares of this company so that it does not enter into some sort of cantankerous situation? Because again, everybody goes in thinking that it's going to be just peachy. Oftentimes couples do not want to have a prenup conversation because they believe that it's potentially setting them up for divorce. But at the same time, a shareholders agreement, you hope that you never have to trigger it. And so a prenup you kind of set in place and say, yeah, but if it's all good, we'll never need to use this. It will never need to be pulled out of the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
I did try with a client one time to, because they really wanted to put in place something called a post-nup, which is we're married already and here's how it's going to go if things go bad. I've never had a client successfully get a post-nup signed. That's never been something.
So don't do that. Word to the wise.
Yeah. Another thing is that family businesses, they often think they don't need a shareholders agreement. We don't need a shareholders agreement. We're all family here. Everybody's going to do this and we're going to step up. And those can go even more poorly when you have a family business, because if you're married to somebody and that person dies who's the family tie, technically they're not your family anymore. And they might think, this is my last chance to get as much money as I possibly can out of this. Because after this, I don't know what this relationship's going to continue at all. Or if parents, first generation, decide, hey, you know what? I'm going to start divesting of my ownership before an estate. I'm going to start giving shares to my kids. Mm-hmm. And they do that when they're just, let's say they have 3 kids. Oh, the kids are at home. But then the kids start getting married and they own a piece of the business. Well, that business has just now become subject to marital property within that marriage. And you had no intent. Now that child gets divorced a couple years into that marriage, and that share could be, if this is a young person and maybe this is a very old family business, that share could be worth a massive amount of their net worth. And now all of a sudden the family is shelling out a bunch of money to buy out a spouse that was kind of brand new, introduced. And, just because the marriage doesn't last long doesn't mean they weren't part of that property. So all things to consider when you're getting married.
Yes. I know, it's like fun things to consider when you're getting married, right?
Yeah.
It does make you more mindful. And honestly, after the experiences that I've had, I can say that it's like having a good foundation of anything in your life. If you have really good health, you want to maintain that. If you have a really good idea for a business and you're bringing it to fruition, you want the foundation to stay in place. And it can't if you keep getting the pins knocked out from under you because there's cash going out all the time for paying for quote unquote, what I'll call mistakes, for being too quote unquote nice, so it's like I'm sorry doesn't actually get you out of financial problems, so people apologize all day long when things go sideways, but that doesn't change what's going on in the bank account or with the lawyers. And and again, it's not just you sitting at the table that can be affected by this. To your point, Ben, it can be a family. It could be your parents. Your parents could be getting ready to retire or they've retired already and they're accounting on a certain amount of income from their estate. And then all of a sudden you've got somebody comes in and you didn't have something in place properly and they take a big chunk of cash out. All of a sudden your parents, who were set up pretty nicely for having a nice retirement, are going, how are we going to pay our utility bills this month? So
100%.
so those are real things. Greg, I'm sure you've got some.
Oh, like I said, we've seen good stories and bad stories. The key in this, in the words of wisdom to share, is have the conversation. Don't be embarrassed, excuse me, or don't be shy to have that conversation. Just talk. It started out. Hopefully this episode serves as an inspiration for some of you. Just if you haven't had that conversation, do. Now, I like to share the good and the bad. We had one guest, 𝑸𝒖𝒂𝒃𝒍𝒆 who's now 𝑸𝒖𝒂𝒃𝒍𝒆 on one of our earlier episodes. And she went through not only divorce with her husband, but they were also in business together. And I had the joy of actually helping both of them from a very neutral standpoint, pull apart the business part. And again, thank God they had the basis, the foundation of a framework to actually break things apart. And she described it was kind of like pulling apart gum. Like it was literally, it took time and it was really stretchy and gross, but having that same conversation. So I encourage anyone, if you want to hear how to do it the right way, we called it smoothly, serenely, and something or other. That's still on the Master Your Life website, masteryourlife.ca. And again, the interview with Kritika. Leaha, you really got a kick out of that show.
Oh, I did. Cause it was fun and funny. And I have had the opportunity to work with people who've had successful divorces. I would say that. I interviewed a fellow probably like 5 years ago, at least, Dean Anderson, and he wrote a book called The Selfish Divorce. And it was really about this idea of treating each other how you would want to be treated, because that's the best thing that you could do at the end of the day. So if you want to be honored, respected, cared for, thought of, your future being thought of, then do the same for that other person. And that's the most selfish thing that you can do. And that was kind of Kritika's story as well. So I think people, yes, some can get out of the reptilian brain, but it's still, if you don't have an agreement in place, you still have to have all of these really, really difficult discussions. And that can cost you, even like having mediators in place or paying for lawyers to be in the room, or, the animosity. If you're not at peace, if there's animosity between the two of you, distrust, mistrust, and to your point again, Ben, about like what caused the disruption in the relationship. Is it that somebody was cheating? Like, what's all the human drama that's gone on that's caused the problem in the first place? If it's just two people being honorable, going, you know what, I'm not really feeling this business anymore. I've got another business idea and I'd like to exit stage, left. And that's all, been planned out over a couple of years. That's completely different than somebody who has got a gambling problem or a drug addiction or a sex addiction or stepped out or whatever it is on the relationship. So then you're not dealing with people who are just all, kumbaya. So
yeah, they're exiting stage left, but it might be with that long hook thing, or they might just like stomp out of there,
right,
and pull the curtain down when they go. You ever heard the saying, it's not whether you win or lose, but how you play the game?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's true, I think, of so many things in life. Mm-hmm. And when you're going through any type of relational breakdown, I think you have to remember, there's going to be a lot of minutia here. There's lots of little details. And if you let yourself really get lost in that, mm-hmm. You're doing yourself more a disservice than anything. And that's going to create a lot of negativity that's going to be very hard for you to release at some later point in your life. And so, whenever you're kind of going through those kind of things, I speak from kind of personal experience and business dealings and relational dealings that I've had in the past. Getting lost in the fine details of stuff will oftentimes just lead to unnecessary heartache, and you might feel like you've won, but how you've played the game was just not great. And the one to pay the price for that in the future is probably yourself.
Yeah. Love it. Yeah, that's right. Your integrity could be completely shot. Your self-respect, if you've gone to the bottom of the pit, you might not feel too hot about yourself. So the buy-sell agreement, then, when you're talking about the minutia, those little fine details. That's actually what the buy-sell agreement is intended to deal with. Is that right, Ben?
Correct. I mean, you kind of, when relationships are good, you make these deals, predetermined deals, basically is what the shareholders agreement does, to say, if these things happen, here's how we're going to deal with it. Here's exactly how we're going to deal with it. Here's going to be the amounts. Here's going to be the payment structure. Here's going to be all this. And, you know, these are commitments that you make. So oftentimes, like we were talking about divorce, when you sign a marriage contract, you're actually making a lot of commitments there, relational, financial, and you're signing something that, to some degree, well, we use the word contract, but I believe that the marriage is necessarily supposed to be more of a covenant, which is unbreakable. But, you know, today it's more of a contract. And so you sign this contract, you're agreeing to all of these things. And when you sign a shareholders agreement, you're also agreeing to a bunch of things. And oftentimes that has gone on the shelf and could have been on the shelf for years and years and years and years. A lot of the things that you've agreed to might not even be the case anymore, might not be what you would want to agree to today. So I encourage partners to pull that off of the shelf and review that, typically once a year or once every couple of years. Something that is very, very common in a shareholders agreement is the value determination of the share. So something that we see a lot is, let's say the value determination very commonly is, it says the shareholders will meet annually to determine the value of the share. And there's a little addendum page in the back, amendment, that they will write the new value for the shares and everybody will sign it. Well, how many times do you think this actually happens?
Rarely.
You know, so exactly. It rarely happens. So if this wasn't done, you go to stage 2, which is oftentimes that the company's accountant will set the value for the share. Well, not every accounting firm has what's called CBV, Chartered Business Valuator, on staff. And oftentimes accountants don't actually like being put in this position, because let's say a partner dies and the accountant is getting work from that company. They'll say, well, what value do I put on this company? Do I put a high value? And that would be in favor, like a higher value be in favor of the selling party. But that selling party, I'm not going to get any work from in the future. Like my relationship with them is most likely done after this. And so they're automatically, to some degree, incentivized to put a low value on the business. Now, accounting firms as a practice, we would want to say that there is no kind of incentive at work here. They'll do their work without any type of thought of that. But business valuation is in fact a bit more of an art form than it is a bit of a science. It's very similar to home evaluation, but a lot harder. You know, everybody thinks when they're selling their house that it's worth $1 million, when really you put it on the market and the deal you can get for it, say $600,000. You're like a little bit surprised about that. Well, when you have a shareholders agreement, you're not on the open market. You're having to buy and sell in a very closed environment. And so you don't really want to put maybe an accountant on that pedestal. So sometimes there's chartered business valuators out there, and one can give you one value, the other can give you another value. They could be quite a bit different. So which one do you trust? So with all of those things in the shareholders agreement, I typically recommend pull that off the shelf, see what all of these things say. Are they still the things that you want? Are the people that sign the agreement still there? Or is this a completely different group of people? And make any changes that you need to be made as the years go by and the relationship is still good.
You know, I got to jump in here. The best advice I ever got was to get independent legal advice while going into one of these business arrangements. Because not only have I been through a divorce, so through my marriage, I've been through a business divorce. And thank God we had one of these buy-sell agreements in place where you can then exercise some of these options or this triggering events that Ben describes. Now, I want to talk a little bit and share about the shotgun clause or the reverse shotgun clause. So the reverse shotgun clause will actually stop people from lowballing. So in the one agreement that I've seen is there was an offer put on the table. And then in the reverse shotgun opportunity is that the other partner can either take the offer or they can then buy the other share back at that amount plus a little bit of a variable. So there's a lot of ways you can do it. Again, the key was get independent legal advice by going in so you understand what all these clauses are and what they mean. And again, Ben, you had said and stressed is any of these triggering events, what defines that? And why I keep saying death is the easy one, because death is pretty definite. The disability one, like again, the hardest thing is to be able to stare your partner still in the face while they're still alive. But when is that triggering event? When do you have to like cut the cord and move on, right? Again, the business must move on. And then again, when it comes to divorce or bankruptcy, you said, you know, do you really want to stay in business with a bankruptcy trustee and have them in there controlling the shares? What happens in those instances? So again, getting the independent legal advice of all the different partners. So you can imagine if you got a business with multiple shareholders, you got to make sure that you get opinions that protects your best interests. Because Ben, I'm pretty sure in your career, and you've seen instances where things have actually not went so rosy, not all rainbows, butterflies, and unicorns. Would you agree in some situations? Like, is there a story you could maybe share?
Certainly, yes. Certainly, yes. I've seen this a ton of times. You know, you talk about a shotgun clause, and I guess for the people out there watching, that might sound a little bit extremist, but what it is if you decide you want to leave your business, or if you decide you definitely want to buy somebody out, you can come to an agreement outside of the shareholders agreement. You can just say, hey, can we come to an agreement to buy you out of this company? If everything is working well, perfect. But let's say that person says, no, I'm not going, I'm not selling. If you have something called the shotgun clause in your agreement, you can go to them and say, I'm going to offer you X dollars per share. I'm triggering what's called the shotgun clause. So the shotgun clause says, I'm going to buy you out for, let's say, $5 a share. But in doing so, they have the opportunity to say back to you, I'm going to buy you out for $5 a share. And so the whole idea of it is to say that you're not going to make an offer to somebody that you yourself are not willing to accept, because they could just turn around and buy you out for the same price. Those are typically pretty good because it kind of gives you at least some way of dealing with a heavily cantankerous situation. And I've had a lot of clients that has happened. Either somebody tried to pull the shotgun clause on them and they reversed it and bought them out, or vice versa. But those are oftentimes your kind of last resort type situations. So I think of one company that happened to. Used to be a series of shareholders, and it's now just one person. But the company is now thriving and successful. But they needed to do it to, well, Leah mentioned as well, there could be some addiction issues or some lifestyle issues that are happening that are just not great for company culture. And those things, sometimes you need to pull that trigger for the health of the business. And so now their business is thriving and healthy, but they needed to get rid of sometimes those things that just come to terrorize the company culture. And unfortunately, a company will be made up heavily by its leadership. And so you have to make sure that the leadership team is healthy and well.
So all great points. And Leah, you've done a lot of work with the corporate world. So share maybe some of your experiences you've seen.
Well, what is culture? What is your culture is a really important question for people to actually answer. And then to do an evaluation of that and go, am I on the culture track that I wanted to be on, or is there some tweaking that we need to do? And it's sincerely, I think that people go, oh, that's all the woo-woo stuff. We just want to do our thing. We just want to do our thing. You don't need an HR person to do that. You just need to have reasonable human beings who want to sit around and have a conversation about how you want things to be. So do you want it to be a happy place? Do you want it to be a healthy place? What does that mean? Do you want it to be a place where people show up on time? Do people need to be told what to do every day and micromanaged, or is it a team of people that you've hired that are excellent, Olympic in their functioning, and when they show up at work, you just let them do their magic and you stay out of the way. So those things are all really important to how your culture looks. And in dealing, I was really lucky to work with, I won't name who it is, but a $425 million privately owned company as their only executive coach for a span of about 4 years. So an Alberta company. And they, what I was marveled at, and is they never had an HR department. And they never had an HR department because they actually expected the managers to manage their own people. So this was a very neat structure. And it reminded me of another company that I worked for about 20 years ago that was ARC Resources, and they had the same perspective. It was like, we hire the best and the brightest, we let them do their jobs, we expect people to show up at work and shine. It's like first break all the rules. That was the thinking. So, that is that you operate at your excellence and best every single day. And so when you're sitting around the table with people and going, is this a person, or am I a person, first of all, that operates from my best every single day? There's these self-reflective questions that are important. And if I'm not, then what am I going to do to correct that? And it's funny about like the question of health. When we go, do we have a healthy business? The people are the business. So if your people are not healthy, your business, if it's a building, is a building. No one's going to be showing up to work. They just aren't going to be doing it. So you have to look at the health of your actual members of the staff and of the people who are your professionals that are helping you to make your decisions. I often say to people, why would you hire somebody who does not have a six-figure business to coach you to have a six-figure business? It just doesn't make any sense, but people do it all the time. It's like, oh, I'm going to hire so-and-so because they're, blah. It's like, I wouldn't hire a health coach that weighed 250 pounds or was 50 pounds overweight. Like, that just doesn't make any sense to me. So it's like, what is your culture? What are your expectations? How does that help you to have a strong company? And how does it help you to have strength at the end of the day when you leave your workplace to actually carry on in the same manner as you do at work? Like, do you show up at work the same way that you show up in the rest of your life? Because people will go, oh, I wear one hat and then I wear another hat. No, you're the same person. And I think people are finding that out through staying home in 2020, that people went, gee, was this different person at the office. And why was that? Why did I seem happier when I went to work? And maybe I need to bring some of that home to my home life or the opposite. I hated going to work, and at home I'm all happy and
Leah froze.
Bring my bed.
There we go.
Oh, sorry. Anyway, so that those culture things are important, and your own health is important, and being transparent enough to sit down and have the conversations so that you can know what's coming down the road, so you can all be honorable. And going back to Ben, your story of your family and this honor and nobility that your father instilled in you. I know if people haven't watched the other episodes that we've done with you, I'd love it if you just tell a snippet of that, because I think it talks a little bit, Ben, to your culture and why you kind of think in this either noble or excellent way.
Well, thank you for that. I guess my father got into, at one point, as just a quick recap, he got into knights, like knights, medieval knights, that type of thing, and loved kind of what they stood for. And my dad tried to instill that into us, and that's kind of what I have in back here, a letter from my father before he passed away, and this sword that he gave us all in a time when he was able to knight his three sons and welcome us into this kind of knighthood of nobility and fighting for the rights of people who can't do that for themselves. So it was an awesome thing. And I think I got into that in greater detail in a previous podcast episode. So feel free to go back and listen to that.
Yes.
When you were talking about businesses and leadership and who people are, have you guys ever made sourdough?
Yes.
You ever made sourdough? So I have not made sourdough myself, but I have a friend that's getting big into trying to make sourdough. And to make a loaf of bread, like normal bread, you could just whip that thing up and you can make a loaf of bread, like in an afternoon. But sourdough, you have to create this starter that you mix all of these things, and they've got to sit together for a long time. And, you kind of add different things. It's like a work of art. And then from this starter, you can make these loaves of bread. But if your starter really sucks, then your loaf of bread's going to be horrible, right? And then you can share the starter with other people. And that's a lot like company leadership. Mm-hmm. You have to take the leadership. You have to really make sure that it's strong. You have to add little ingredients here and there. You have to take time away from the business. You have to grow those relationships, because those relationships are your starter, and your loaf of bread's either going to be amazing or it's going to be horrible. And that a lot of that is from the starter. The same is true with any marital relationship. You know, you have to invest the time into it. You have to invest because that's your starter, and the rest of your life is either going to really suck or it's going to be really great.
Well, all great words of wisdom. We're coming up on our time today. One thing I will share, just one last thing before we close out the show is, you know what, even having a chat with someone who's maybe gone through this, there's a lot of wisdom, like I said, collective wisdom that people have went through a divorce or went through a business divorce. Just talking to someone like that, just to help prepare yourself, whether you're going through it or about to, or plan for it in the future in case it does. I think there's some wisdom of sharing those experiences and just having that open conversation. Now, we joked about what song of the day could we close out this show, and I tell you, we thought of Queen, Another One Bites the Dust, but I thought, no, that one might be. We've tried that on another episode, but there is a Queen song. And so again, all the great listeners out in the UK today and across the world who love Queen, Freddie Mercury had this song called The Show Must Go On. So that's the one I've chosen for today. Are you guys ready for this one?
Read on.
Yeah. All right, here we go. The song by Queen, The Show Must Go On. Empty spaces, what are we living for? Abandoned places, I guess we know the score, on and on. Does anyone know what we're looking for? Another hero, another mindless crime. Behind the curtain in the pantomime, hold the line. Does anybody want to take it anymore? The show must go on, the show must go on. Yeah, inside my heart is breaking. My makeup may be flaking, but my smile still stays on. Whatever happens, I'll leave it all to chance. Another heartache, another failed romance. On and on, does anyone know what we're living for? I guess I'm learning. I must be warmer now. I'll soon be turning around the corner now. Outside the dawn is breaking, but inside the dark, I'm aching to be free. The show must go on, the show must go on. Inside my heart is breaking, my makeup may be flaking, but my smile still stays on. My soul is painted like the wings of butterflies, fairy tales of yesterday, grow but never die. I can fly, my friends. The show must go on, the show must go on. I'll top the bill, I'm overkill. I have to find the will to carry on. On with the show, the show must go on, go on, go on. Guys, by Queen, The Show Must Go On. Leah, you want to close up the show?
Right on. Well, I would say thank you, Freddie, but people, please don't leave it all to chance. We don't need to leave all this stuff to chance. If you want to get a hold of Ben or Greg, you can find out how to do that in the show notes. You can come visit us at masteryourlife.ca to watch the entire recording. Ben, any final words to folks?
I guess it would be, if you have a shareholders agreement, pull that off the shelf, get some good legal advice on it, see what you have committed to. And if you don't have one yet, chat with a lawyer and get one of those in place.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. All right, so you know what to do. Get your corporate hygiene happening. We love you all. Love yourselves. Love each other. Mind your minds. That's all for us. Bye for now, everybody.
Bye, guys. Thanks, Leah. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you for being a part of our program today. Master Your Life is a presentation of Leaha Mattinson Enterprises, Inc. Join us next time on Master Your Life, helping you to discover the very best of you.